Oh, Duke, what a disgrace!
Look at her gown.
The laughter began before the priest pronounced them husband and wife. Even a bankrupt duke could have purchased a prettier bride, someone called from the gallery. Eleanor Vale kept her scarred face lifted, while aristocrats whispered that the Duke of Ashcombe had married her only for control of her father's valuable paper mills. Sebastian heard every word but remained silent, convinced that responding would only deepen the scandal. His silence wounded her more than the laughter. Outside the cathedral, Eleanor found a cruel caricature nailed to their carriage. Yet the moment she touched it, humiliation gave way to alarm. The sheet bore a hidden watermark used only in paper manufactured for the British Treasury. No ordinary printer could have obtained it. She slipped the caricature beneath her cloak, just as a royal officer arrived with orders to search Ashcombe House. Someone had flooded London with counterfeit government notes, and every sheet appeared to have come from Eleanor's inheritance. By marrying her, had the Duke saved his estate or given the crown the perfect woman to hang? The officer dismounted before the carriage had moved an inch. Captain Nathaniel Rowe wore the dark blue coat of the Bow Street Horse Patrol, but the 6 armed men behind him bore the insignia of the Treasury. The wedding crowd fell silent with astonishing speed. Mockery was amusing. An arrest for treason was something even the boldest aristocrat preferred to witness from a safe distance. Your Grace, Rowe bowed stiffly to Sebastian. Under authority of the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Ashcombe House and every property belonging to Vale Security Works are to be searched immediately. Sebastian descended the cathedral steps. On what grounds? Rowe removed a folded note from his coat. It looked ordinary until he held it toward the sunlight. A silver thread shimmered beneath the ink. Counterfeit government bonds, with a face value exceeding £80,000, entered circulation 3 days ago. The paper has been identified as Vale Manufacture. A delighted whisper moved through the crowd. Eleanor heard someone laugh behind a gloved hand. Another woman remarked that ugliness had apparently not been Miss Vale's only defect. Sebastian's jaw hardened, but once again he did not turn toward them. Vale Security Works has supplied the Treasury for 23 years, Eleanor said. Every government batch is recorded by weight, watermark, and delivery number. If you permit me to examine that note, Captain, I may be able to tell you when it was produced. Rowe hesitated. His gaze traveled over the dark scar running from Eleanor's left temple to the corner of her mouth. She knew that expression. It was the brief confusion of a man who had expected the woman described by the newspapers, a desperate, grotesque heiress who had purchased a duke, but found someone speaking with the calm precision of a tradesman. You may look, he said, but you may not touch. Eleanor leaned close. The bond carried the Vale crown beneath its printed denomination, yet one detail was wrong. Her father had designed the crown with 7 points. This one possessed 8. Not a mistake, she realized. A signal. Before his death, Gideon Vale had experimented with an 8-point watermark for a secret treasury contract. Only 12 men had known of it. The entire trial batch had supposedly been pulped after the government canceled the project. When was this bond discovered? She asked. That is treasury business. Then you do not want my assistance. You want my confession. A murmur passed through the spectators. Sebastian looked at her sharply, as though seeing for the first time that the quiet woman he had married could draw blood without raising her voice. Captain Rowe refolded the note. We found 11 bonds in the possession of a banker arrested at Dover. He claimed they came from Ashcombe House. That is impossible, Sebastian said. Then the search will prove it. Rowe signaled his men toward the waiting horses. Before mounting, he faced Eleanor again. You are not under arrest, Duchess. Not yet. But neither you nor your husband may leave London without permission. Duchess. It was the first time anyone had addressed her by her new title without laughter. Yet it sounded less like an honor than the turning of a key inside a prison door. Sebastian helped her into the carriage. His hand remained beneath hers, only long enough to satisfy the watching crowd. Once the door closed, he sat opposite her, rigid beneath his black wedding coat. You knew about the watermark, he said. I knew what my father taught me. You never mentioned a restricted batch. You never asked me anything about the mills before proposing marriage. Your solicitors asked only their value." The accusation struck its mark. Sebastian looked toward the window, where caricatures of their marriage were already being sold to the crowd. "My estate employs nearly 400 families," he said. "Your trustees intended to sell the mills to settle your uncle's debts. Our marriage prevented that, and placed both properties under your protection." "Yes, or under the same accusation." His eyes returned to hers. "Do you believe I arranged this?" "If I did, I would not be sitting within your reach." For the first time that day, something almost human disturbed his composure. Not affection, not trust, perhaps shame. Eleanor drew the caricature from beneath her cloak and unfolded it across her lap. The drawing exaggerated her scar, enlarged her teeth, and placed a chain around Sebastian's neck. Beneath them, the artist had written, "Ashcombe sells his name to the paper mill beast." Sebastian reached for it, but Eleanor stopped him. "Look at the lower corner." A tiny number had been pressed into the sheet, 17. Sebastian frowned. "What does it mean?" Every government batch received a production number. The cancelled experimental paper was batch 17. Then whoever printed this had access to the same paper used for the counterfeit bonds. Yes, outside, hundreds of people waved identical caricatures. Eleanor looked through the carriage window and understood why the insult had spread across England so quickly. The pictures were not merely intended to humiliate her. Someone had distributed stolen treasury paper throughout London in plain sight, ensuring that witnesses everywhere would associate it with her face, her mills, and her marriage. The laughter was not a consequence of the crime. It was part of the evidence being manufactured against her. The carriage lurched forward, carrying them away from the cathedral, as the crowd pressed close to its windows. Some raised caricatures. Others shouted that Sebastian had sold his title to a criminal. A rotten apple struck the door beside Eleanor's head and burst against the Ashcombe crest. Sebastian pulled down the leather shade. Eleanor lifted it again. "If they can see us, they will assume we have nothing to hide. They have already decided what they believe. Then hiding will only make their story easier to print." He studied her for a moment before sitting back. The shade remained raised. They reached Ashcombe House 20 minutes later. Treasury officers had arrived before them. Drawers stood open in the entrance hall, ledgers covered the floor, and two men were removing paintings from the walls to search behind the frames. Eleanor had entered the house only once before, during the signing of her marriage settlement. Now it was supposed to be her home, yet armed strangers occupied every room before she had spent a single night beneath its roof. A housekeeper with silver hair hurried forward. "Your Grace, I am Mrs. Bellamy." She curtsied first to Sebastian, and then, without hesitation, equally low to Eleanor. "I regret that your arrival should be met with such disorder." "Has anything been removed?" Eleanor asked. 3 account books, 2 locked dispatch boxes, and the contents of His Grace's writing desk. Eleanor glanced toward the officers searching the drawing room. "Did you record which man took each item?" Mrs. Bellamy blinked. "No, Your Grace." "Then please begin now. Write every officer's name, every object he handles, and the room from which it was taken. Have a servant witness each entry." Sebastian removed his gloves. "Captain Rowe carries a royal warrant. A warrant permits a search. It does not excuse careless custody. If a document later appears where it was not found, we must be able to prove it." Mrs. Bellamy's expression changed from surprise to approval. At once. She gathered 2 footmen and transformed a small table in the entrance hall into a record station. For the first time since leaving the cathedral, Eleanor felt the ground steady beneath her. Paper could be altered, seals could be copied, memories could be frightened into confusion. But a record made at the proper moment, witnessed by several people, was much harder to destroy. Her father had taught her that when she was 11. Gideon Vale had never hidden his daughter from the mill workers because of her face. While society whispered that no man would marry her, he taught her how linen rags became pulp, how water altered fiber strength, and how a watermark could identify not merely a manufacturer, but a particular mold, vat, and production day. "Beauty is useful at a ball," he had once told her. Accuracy is useful everywhere. After his death 6 months earlier, Eleanor's uncle, Sir Malcolm Vale, had taken control of the company as trustee. He dismissed her questions, barred her from the main office, and announced that the mills were losing money. Then he arranged their sale to an unnamed London investor. Marriage to Sebastian had been Eleanor's only lawful means of stopping him. Under their agreement, the Duke gained authority to challenge the sale, but he could neither sell the mills nor use them as security without her written consent. It had been a bargain, not a courtship. Now, someone appeared determined to make that bargain look like conspiracy. Eleanor, Sebastian's use of her Christian name drew her back to the hall. Captain Rowe stood beside him holding a narrow black box. "This was found in the West Library," Rowe said. The box bore the Vale crest. Eleanor did not approach it. "Where exactly?" "Inside a locked cabinet." "Whose cabinet?" "Mine," Sebastian said. His face had become unreadable. "Only my secretary and I possess keys." Rowe opened the box. Inside lay a metal watermarking die shaped like an 8-point crown. A younger officer carried another object from the library, a wrapped bundle of unprinted security paper. Mrs. Bellamy's pen stopped scratching. Eleanor looked at Sebastian. "Did you know that box was in your cabinet?" "No." "Then someone placed it there." "Or you did," Rowe said. "I had never entered the West Library until today." "Your belongings arrived from Vale House yesterday. My trunks were placed in the Duchess's rooms. Mrs. Bellamy can confirm it." The housekeeper stepped forward. "I supervised their arrival myself. None were taken to the library." Rowe's mouth tightened. It was not proof of innocence, but it disturbed the simplicity of his accusation. Eleanor examined the bundle without touching it. The outermost sheet carried an 8-point crown, but the paper's color was too gray and its surface too smooth. "Bring me a basin of clean water, a candle, and 2 silver spoons," she said. Rowe frowned. "For what purpose?" "To determine whether that paper came from my mill." Sebastian ordered the items brought. A maid returned with them, her hands trembling. Eleanor asked Rowe to tear a narrow strip from the edge of one sheet and place it in the water. "A genuine Vale bond sheet contains linen fiber and a small quantity of blue cotton," Eleanor explained. "When soaked, the cotton separates first. The water should remain clear." Within seconds, yellow dye bled from the strip. Rowe leaned over the basin. "This paper was whitened after manufacture," Eleanor said. "Vale Security Works has never used that process. The watermark resembles ours, but the sheet was produced elsewhere." Sebastian's gaze settled on her with the first unmistakable trace of respect. "Then the evidence is false," he said. "The paper is false," Eleanor corrected. "The dye may still be genuine." Captain Rowe lifted it with a cloth. A shallow scratch crossed the crown's longest point. Eleanor's breath caught. She had seen that mark before. Her father had made it accidentally while demonstrating the experimental mold to her. If this was the same dye, it should have been locked in the Vale Mill's iron archive and destroyed after his death. Rowe closed the box. "Until the Treasury examines these objects, no conclusion will be drawn." A footman hurried into the hall carrying a sealed message. "It has come from Vale Security Works, Your Grace." Eleanor broke the wax. The letter was from Amos Reed, the elderly foreman, who had taught her to judge pulp by touch. Its few lines were written in a shaking hand. The Treasury officers had seized the mill. Sir Malcolm had ordered every worker dismissed. More troubling still, 3 wagons had removed sealed paper bales from the warehouse shortly before dawn. Eleanor read the message twice. According to the official inventory, every government sheet had remained inside the locked warehouse until the seizure. Yet Amos had watched 3 wagons carry paper away hours earlier. Someone had not merely planted evidence at Ashcombe House. Someone had emptied the real warehouse before the Crown could count what was missing. Eleanor handed Amos Reed's letter to Sebastian. He read it beneath the chandelier while Captain Rowe watched them both. "When was the mill seized?" Sebastian asked. "Shortly after 7 this morning," Rowe replied. "And the wagons departed before dawn," Eleanor said. "Who informed the Treasury that the counterfeit bonds came from Vale paper?" Rowe's expression closed. "The source remains confidential." Then your confidential source waited until the real evidence had disappeared before sending you to collect what someone planted here. You are making assumptions. I am identifying a sequence. Eleanor pointed to the watermarking die inside the black box. If that instrument truly came from our archive, someone entered the mill before the seizure. Amos Reed has served my family for 31 years. He would not invent 3 wagons. Rowe glanced at the yellow water in the basin. His certainty had already been damaged once. What do you require? He asked. Permission to inspect the warehouse before Sir Malcolm rearranges anything. Sebastian's shoulders stiffened at her uncle's name. Sir Malcolm had negotiated aggressively during the marriage settlement, insisting that Eleanor knew nothing about business and that immediate sale of the mills was the only protection against bankruptcy. Rowe agreed on the condition that 2 officers accompany them. Vale Security Works stood beside the Thames in Wapping, surrounded by warehouses, rope yards, and narrow streets blackened by coal smoke. When the Ashcombe carriage arrived, nearly 100 dismissed workers had gathered outside the iron gates. Their anger changed to uncertainty when Eleanor stepped down. Some bowed, others stared at her wedding gown, already stained by mud and rotten fruit. A boy near the gate held one of the caricatures from the cathedral. Seeing her notice it, he crumpled the sheet and hid it behind his back. Eleanor? Amos Reed pushed through the crowd. He was 63, broad-shouldered despite his age, with white paper dust embedded permanently in the lines of his hands. He stopped before embracing her, remembering the Duke and the officers surrounding her. Your Grace, he said awkwardly. You called me Miss Vale yesterday. I have not changed so much overnight. His eyes moved to the scar on her cheek, then to the ruined hem of her dress. No, he said, you have not. Sir Malcolm Vale emerged from the gatehouse before Amos could say more. He wore a brown coat with a fox fur collar and carried the silver-headed cane that had belonged to Eleanor's father. My dear niece, his voice was loud enough for the workers to hear. You should never have come. The Crown suspects you of a capital crime, and appearing here may be interpreted as an attempt to influence witnesses. My husband and Captain Rowe are accompanying me. Sir Malcolm bowed to Sebastian. Your Grace, I warned you that Eleanor's attachment to this place often overcomes her judgment. Sebastian's face revealed nothing. Then her judgment will be tested against the facts. It was not a declaration of trust, but it silenced Sir Malcolm. Inside the warehouse, Treasury officers had marked each door with red wax. Rowe broke the principal seal himself and recorded the time. Mrs. Bellamy's insistence on documenting the search had apparently impressed him. He now required an officer to note every person who entered. The warehouse smelled of damp timber, linen pulp, and river mud. Rows of paper bales stood beneath canvas coverings. Sir Malcolm gestured toward them. As you see, nothing has been removed. Eleanor did not count the bales. She examined the floor. Each government bale weighed 240 pounds. Stored for several weeks, it left 4 rectangular impressions in the layer of dust beneath its wooden supports. Near the eastern wall, 18 clean rectangles showed where heavy objects had stood until recently. Something occupied those spaces, she said. Ordinary commercial paper, Sir Malcolm replied, sent to customers yesterday. Where are the dispatch orders? In the office. Then Captain Rowe may inspect them. Sir Malcolm's fingers tightened around the silver cane. While Rowe sent an officer for the orders, Eleanor knelt beside the nearest empty space. A short length of blue and black cord lay beneath a broken wooden support. Government bales were bound with that pattern, so warehouse clerks could distinguish them from commercial stock in dim light. A crushed lead seal remained attached to one end. Eleanor did not touch it. Captain, there is an object beneath this support. Rowe crouched beside her. Using a folded sheet of clean paper, he lifted the cord and seal. The lead disc bore the number 43. Amos drew a sharp breath. What is it? Sebastian asked. Each government bale receives a numbered seal after inspection, Eleanor said. The number is entered in 3 ledgers, one kept here, one in the mill office, and one sent monthly to the Treasury. Rowe looked toward Sir Malcolm. Where is the warehouse ledger? Sir Malcolm indicated a desk near the loading doors. The book was produced and opened. Seal 43 was listed as commercial stationery, delivered to a printer in Fleet Street. The entry bore Amos Reed's initials. "I did not write that," Amos said. Sir Malcolm gave a tired sigh. "You are an elderly man, Reed. Memory becomes unreliable." Eleanor compared the entry with the letter still tucked inside her glove. Amos formed the letter R with a long descending stroke. The ledger's R ended in a short hook. "This is not his hand." Sir Malcolm's gaze sharpened. For the first time, he stopped treating her as an inconvenience and looked at her as a threat. "The Duchess has endured an exhausting mourning," he said. "Perhaps grief and excitement are encouraging her to see conspiracies." Eleanor turned the page. 6 adjacent entries had been written in the same false hand. Together, they accounted for 18 bales, the exact number of empty impressions on the floor. "Which printer supposedly received them?" Rowe asked. "Sir Malcolm named Digby and Sons of Fleet Street." Sebastian looked toward the high warehouse windows. "We passed that establishment last month. It has been closed since Christmas." Silence settled over the room. Eleanor walked to the loading doors. 3 parallel wagon tracks crossed the mud outside, but instead of leading toward the main gate, they turned behind the rag-sorting building. Amos shook his head. "There is no exit there." "There was once," Eleanor said. Her father had sealed the old river gate 10 years earlier after a child nearly fell from its landing. When they reached it, the bricks remained in place, but the entire iron frame had been removed from the surrounding mortar and carefully returned after the wagons passed. Fresh scratches marked the bolts. Wet river mud clung to the threshold. The paper had not left through the guarded road at all. It had been loaded onto barges from the abandoned landing, while the gatehouse register remained perfectly clean. Eleanor looked back at the forged ledger, the numbered seal, and her uncle's suddenly pale face. 18 government bales had vanished through an exit known only to senior mill employees. Their disappearance had not been hurried. Someone had prepared it weeks in advance. Captain Rowe ordered both the forged ledger and the numbered seal placed inside a Treasury evidence case. Amos Reed and 2 officers signed across the wax securing it. Sir Malcolm objected that a common foreman had no authority to witness Crown evidence, but Rowe ignored him. "Eleanor," Sebastian said quietly, "can you determine when the river gate was opened?" She examined the iron frame without disturbing the scratches. Grease still shone around the lowest hinge, and several curls of fresh metal lay beneath it. "The bolts were removed recently, no more than 2 days ago." Sir Malcolm struck his cane against the stones. "She cannot possibly know that." "The filings have not rusted," Sebastian replied. "Even I can see it." Eleanor glanced at him. His defense was measured rather than gallant, but it mattered because he had supported her observation before men accustomed to dismissing her. Captain Rowe ordered the area sealed. Then he turned to Amos. "You admit that your initials appear beside 6 false dispatches?" "They are not mine. You also knew about the abandoned landing. So did every worker employed before it was closed." Sir Malcolm gave a regretful shake of his head. "Reed has been struggling with gambling debts. My brother repeatedly rescued him." Amos went pale. "That is a lie." "Captain," Sir Malcolm continued, "search his rooms. You may discover where his loyalty truly lies." Rowe signaled to one of his officers. Eleanor stepped between them. "If Amos is removed before the warehouse inventory is completed, the only man who remembers the original bail order will be unavailable to verify it." "That may be convenient for him," Rowe said. "Then hold him here under guard. Let him account for each seal in your presence." Sir Malcolm's mouth curled. "You are protecting a man whose initials appear on stolen goods. I am protecting the integrity of your investigation. If you imprison him now, every discrepancy discovered afterward can be blamed on his absence." Rowe considered this, then ordered Amos confined to the counting office rather than arrested. "You have placed your reputation behind him," Sir Malcolm told Eleanor. "What remains of it," she answered, "is mine to place." By noon, Amos had reconstructed the missing inventory from 3 separate sources: the VAT records, the drying room totals, and the warehouse weight book. 18 government bales had been produced, sealed, and delivered to storage. None had been authorized for commercial sale. The calculation also revealed something worse. Each bale contained enough paper for 500 large denomination bonds. If all 18 were printed and circulated, the counterfeit value could exceed £1 million. Rose stared at the total. The Bank of England could face a panic. Only if the public learns the counterfeits are nearly impossible to distinguish, Sebastian said. From outside came the cry of a newspaper vendor. They emerged from the warehouse to find broadsheets already circulating among the dismissed workers. Duke of Ashcombe discovers fraud at Bride's Mill. A smaller line declared that Sebastian had personally exposed the false ledger and located the secret river route. Eleanor was described as present but overcome by distress. She read the article once and folded it. Sir Malcolm spread his hands. Reporters are careless creatures. This was printed before we finished counting the missing bales, Eleanor said. The article included the exact seal number found beneath the support. Only those inside the warehouse had known it. Captain Rowe seized the newspaper. No officer was authorized to speak to the press. Sir Malcolm looked offended. Surely you do not accuse me. I accuse no one yet. Sebastian read the opening lines. His face darkened. The article says I recognized Amos Reed's forged initials. Eleanor met his gaze. You had not seen his handwriting before today. No. The person who dictated this story wanted the public to believe the discovery came from a duke, rather than from the woman accused of producing the paper. Sebastian tore the newspaper cleanly down the center. A few workers looked up at the sound. He climbed onto a loading platform and faced them. The discovery was made by the Duchess of Ashcombe. Without her knowledge, the missing paper and falsified records would have remained concealed. The crowd grew still. A reporter near the gate began writing. Sebastian continued. Any newspaper claiming otherwise is printing a lie. It was not romantic. He did not praise her courage or call her beautiful. He simply restored ownership of what she had done. Eleanor found that more affecting than any rehearsed compliment he might have offered at the cathedral. Sir Malcolm's expression remained polite, but the hand around his cane had turned white. As they prepared to leave, Eleanor returned briefly to the warehouse. She told Rowe she wished to compare the black watermarking die with the production records. When he opened the evidence box, she confirmed that the scratch across the longest point matched a small drawing in her father's private notebook. She did not tell Rowe everything. The notebook contained a note in Gideon Vale's hand, flawed during demonstration. Never entered into treasury inventory. Retain in private cabinet until instructions arrive. Officially, that die had never existed. If Eleanor announced this now, anyone involved could claim her father had secretly produced the counterfeits. Instead, she asked Rowe to seal a written description of the scratch without explaining its importance. Mrs. Bellamy's custody procedure had taught him caution. He complied, and gave Eleanor a witnessed copy. On the journey back to Ashcombe House, Sebastian sat beside her rather than opposite. You withheld something at the mill, he said. My father created that die privately. Whoever stole it must have entered his personal cabinet. Who possessed a key? My father, Sir Malcolm, and me. Sebastian did not recoil from her. Did your uncle know about the flaw? I do not know. I intend to find out without warning him which detail matters. A faint expression crossed Sebastian's face. Approval, perhaps. You do not frighten easily. I have been stared at since childhood. Fear becomes exhausting when practiced daily. His gaze moved toward the scar that society had made the center of her identity. Unlike the wedding guests, he did not look away quickly or stare with morbid curiosity. My silence at the cathedral was wrong, he said. Yes. The blunt answer startled him. Eleanor looked through the window. An apology will matter more when the harm has been corrected. He accepted the rebuke without defending himself. At Ashcombe House, Mrs. Bellamy waited with another newspaper and a sealed envelope. The new headline read, Ugly Duchess bribes millworker to accuse innocent trustee. Inside the envelope was a copy of the private statement Eleanor had given Captain Rowe less than an hour earlier. Someone had added a sentence in imitation of her handwriting. Amos Reed will say whatever I require, provided his debts are paid. Beneath it lay a list of payments from Eleanor's personal account to Amos over the previous 6 months. They were genuine. She had paid for medicine for his dying wife, but on paper, they looked exactly like bribes. Sebastian reached for the bell to summon Roe. Before he could pull it, heavy fists struck the front door. A crown officer's voice echoed through the entrance hall. "We have a warrant for the arrest of the Duchess of Ashcombe." Sebastian opened the door before the servants could reach it. Captain Roe entered with 4 officers and a grave-faced treasury magistrate named Sir Edmund Hawthorne. Unlike Roe, Hawthorne did not look at Eleanor with uncertainty. He looked at her as though the trial had already ended. "Eleanor Vale, Duchess of Ashcombe," he announced. "You are accused of conspiring to manufacture false government securities, removing restricted paper from Crown custody, and bribing a material witness." He held out the warrant. Sebastian read it. "The payments to Amos Reed purchased medicine for his wife. That is what Her Grace now claims. Ask the apothecary. We did. His shop burned 6 weeks ago. His account books were destroyed." Eleanor felt the trap tighten. The medicine had been real, but the records that could prove it no longer existed. "Amos's wife is alive," she said. "She can confirm receiving it." Hawthorne's expression remained cold. "Mrs. Reed was moved from her home this morning. No one knows where she has gone." That frightened Eleanor more than the warrant. Amos would never have allowed his sick wife to travel without telling him. Someone had removed the only person who could explain the payments, and had done so before the accusations became public. Captain Roe held up the altered statement. "Did you write the first portion?" "Yes." "And did you write the final sentence?" "No." The handwriting appears identical. It was copied. Hawthorne turned to Sebastian. "We must examine every private paper brought into this house by your wife." Eleanor looked at him. "My father's dispatch box is protected under our marriage agreement. It may not be opened without my consent." "If you refuse," Hawthorne said, "the Crown will treat that refusal as concealment." Sebastian's gaze settled on her. She saw the struggle behind his composure. He did not believe the evidence entirely, but neither did he trust her enough to oppose the treasury. "Open it," he said. The words struck harder than the laughter at the cathedral. "Eleanor," he continued, "if there is nothing inside, the search will clear you. That is what innocent people are always told before planted evidence is discovered. You ask me to protect 400 families. If I obstruct a Crown investigation, Ashcombe will be seized along with the mills." He was not wrong about the danger. That made his choice no less painful. The officers followed them upstairs to the Duchess's rooms. Mrs. Bellamy produced her record showing that Eleanor's luggage had remained under supervision since its arrival, but the black dispatch box had been packed at Vale House before the Ashcombe servants collected it. Sir Malcolm's housekeeper and 2 footmen had possessed access. Hawthorne dismissed that fact as speculation. Eleanor removed the key from a chain beneath her gown. The box contained her father's private notebook, correspondence with Treasury officials, and the original design for the 8-point crown. Beneath those papers lay something she had never seen: a copper printing plate. Captain Roe lifted it carefully. The engraved face matched the counterfeit bond in his possession. Hawthorne looked at Eleanor. "Do you still claim ignorance?" "Yes." He removed 3 letters from beneath the plate. Each appeared to bear Gideon Vale's signature. They described a private plan to manufacture unregistered government paper and referred to Eleanor as the person who would continue the work after his death. Sebastian read the first letter. His face changed. Eleanor recognized that change. It was not condemnation, but doubt, and doubt from her husband was precisely what the conspirators required. "My father did not write those," she said. "The language resembles his notebook," Sebastian replied. "Resemblance is the purpose of forgery." Hawthorne placed both the plate and letters inside an evidence case. A young Vale clerk named Thomas Pike was brought into the room. Eleanor remembered him as a nervous man who worked beneath Sir Malcolm in the mill office. Pike would not look at her. "Tell His Grace what you told me," Hawthorne ordered. Pike swallowed. "The Duchess instructed me to alter the warehouse ledger." Eleanor stared at him. "When?" 3 weeks ago. "I was never alone with you 3 weeks ago. You sent a message." "Produce it." Pike began trembling. I burned it as you commanded. You told Amos Reed the false entries had come from him, she said. Now you claim they came from me. Which lie were you paid to remember? Hawthorne stepped between them. You will not intimidate a crown witness. Pike finally looked at her. Terror filled his eyes. He was lying, but not confidently. Someone had frightened him into it. Sebastian noticed too. Who threatened you? He asked. No one, Your Grace. Then why are your hands shaking? Before Pike could answer, Hawthorne ordered him removed. Eleanor turned to Sebastian. You permitted them to open the box. I believed cooperation would expose the truth. It exposed only what someone placed there. A sound of breaking glass came from the corridor. One of the officers had dropped a small frame taken from Eleanor's luggage. Behind the portrait inside it, they discovered a folded list of numbers. Hawthorne seized it. Bank branches, he said after scanning the names. London, Bristol, York, Bath, and Manchester. Beside each branch appeared a date and an amount. Every date was tomorrow. Eleanor moved closer, despite the officer guarding her. The figures were written in the same imitation of her hand, but the quantities did not resemble payments. They matched the capacities of standard shipping crates used at Vale Security Works. Someone intended to distribute the missing counterfeit paper to 5 cities before morning. Hawthorne interpreted the list differently. This is your distribution plan. If it were mine, why would I carry it behind a portrait into a house I knew the Treasury would search? Criminals often believe themselves cleverer than they are. Eleanor studied the branch names. The first letters formed L, B, Y, B, M, meaningless. But when she read the numbers beside them, 12, 5, 7, 3, 9, she remembered her father's freight system. Those were not amounts, they were barge route codes. Route 12 led upriver to Westminster. Route 5 terminated near the Bank of England. The remaining routes connected to major coaching inns where sealed parcels could be sent throughout the country before dawn. This was not merely a list designed to incriminate her, it was a genuine timetable disguised as planted evidence. The paper has not yet reached those banks, Eleanor said. Hawthorne signaled to the officers. Take her downstairs. Sebastian stepped forward. She remains Duchess of Ashcombe. She will not be dragged through the street like a common thief. Then she may remain confined here under armed guard until the magistrates meet tomorrow morning. Her rooms will be sealed, and she may speak to no mill employee. Eleanor allowed the officers to remove the key from her neck. As Hawthorne carried away the list, she looked again at the final route code. 9 was not assigned to Manchester. It belonged to the government clearing warehouse beside the Bank of England. At 10 o'clock the next morning, banks across Britain would submit securities there for settlement. If thousands of counterfeit bonds appeared simultaneously, no examiner could identify them quickly enough. The bank would freeze payments. Merchants would demand coin. Smaller banks would collapse before noon. The conspirators had arranged for Eleanor to be imprisoned, Amos discredited, and her mills blamed before the first counterfeit bond reached the clearing tables. Her arrest was not the conclusion of their plan. It was the signal for the real attack to begin. The officers sealed Eleanor's bedroom door and stationed a guard outside. Sebastian was permitted to remain with her for 10 minutes. We must reach the bank before clearing begins, she said. Hawthorne will not allow you to leave this house. Then make him. He possesses a crown warrant, and you possess a seat in the House of Lords, influence at the Treasury, and 400 families who will lose their wages if the mills collapse. Use what you have. Sebastian absorbed the rebuke without protest. What exactly can you prove? Eleanor moved to the writing desk, but every sheet of paper had been removed. She tore the blank margin from the wedding caricature and drew 5 lines representing the shipping routes. The conspirators expect the Crown to follow the list toward 5 banks. That will divide the officers and create panic in every city named. But these numbers are Vale freight codes. The final route leads to the government clearing warehouse. Then the counterfeits will be there. Some of them, enough to be discovered publicly. The real purpose may be to make every legitimate bond produced on Vale paper appear suspicious. Sebastian understood. If the bank rejects all securities from your mills, Merchants holding genuine bonds will demand payment in coin. And no bank keeps enough coin to satisfy every depositor at once. A commotion rose from the street below. Sebastian pulled aside the curtain. Hundreds of people had gathered outside Ashcombe House. Some carried newspapers. Others clutched bankbooks and shouted that they wanted their money returned before the ugly Duchess stole it. The panic had already begun. A stone shattered the lower drawing room window. Eleanor looked at the clock. It was nearly 4 in the afternoon. The clearing warehouse would accept sealed deliveries until 8 the following morning. "We have 16 hours," she said. Sebastian left the room. Through the locked door, Eleanor heard him confronting Hawthorne in the corridor. The magistrate refused to move her. "You may take her theories to the bank," Hawthorne said. "The woman remains confined. Her knowledge cannot be carried in my pocket. She is the principal suspect. She is also the only person who identified your false paper, your forged ledger, your compromised Rivergate, and the timetable your officers mistook for a confession. That does not make her innocent. No, but it makes her necessary." Hawthorne still refused. Sebastian then offered something Eleanor had not expected. "If she escapes, obstructs the investigation, or destroys evidence, I will surrender Ashcombe House and place the income of my estate under Treasury control until her trial." Silence followed. Ashcombe was not merely a residence. It was the remaining foundation of Sebastian's title and the security supporting every loan that protected his tenants. He had risked all of it on a woman he had married that morning. Hawthorne opened the door. "You will remain between 2 officers," he told Eleanor. "If you attempt to flee, His Grace loses everything." Eleanor looked at Sebastian. "You should not have offered the estate. I should have trusted your warning before opening the box. It was not a complete repair, but it was the first action that cost him something." They traveled under guard to the Bank of England. By the time they reached Threadneedle Street, depositors filled the surrounding roads. Constables struggled to hold the doors while clerks carried boxes of coin through rear entrances. Rumors had spread that the bank held millions in worthless Vale bonds. Inside, Governor Charles Fenwick met them in a chamber lined with ledgers. Captain Rowe had arrived separately and placed one of the counterfeit bonds on the table. "We cannot suspend every Vale security," Fenwick said. "Doing so would destroy confidence before we establish which bonds are false. And accepting them may fill your vaults with counterfeits," Hawthorne replied. Fenwick turned to Eleanor. "Can you distinguish them?" "If they were printed on the stolen experimental batch, yes." Rowe placed the bond beneath a lamp. Its visible watermark showed a 7-point crown, apparently identical to the approved Vale design. Hawthorne's mouth tightened. "You told us the experimental crown possessed 8 points. It does. Then this is not from that batch. The 8th point is concealed beneath the black border." Eleanor requested a candle, a silver spoon, and a shallow dish of water. She warmed the spoon, pressed it gently against the bond's lower border, and allowed a single drop of water to spread across the fibers. The heavy ink softened, but the paper remained intact. An 8th silver point appeared beneath the border. Fenwick leaned closer. Eleanor indicated the longest point. A faint bent line crossed it, the same flaw Captain Rowe had recorded on the die. "This bond was made from paper carrying my father's experimental watermark. Every counterfeit from the stolen batch will bear that scratch." "Can ordinary clerks perform this examination?" Fenwick asked. "Not quickly. The border must be softened without damaging the note." "Then we cannot inspect thousands before clearing." "We do not need to inspect thousands. We need to identify the shipping bales before they are opened." Eleanor asked Rowe to produce the blue and black cord found beneath the warehouse support. The lead seal numbered 43 remained attached inside its evidence wrapping. Government bales from Vale Works were bound with this cord. The stolen paper left before anyone had time to repackage all 18 bales. Fenwick summoned the warehouse intake register. 4 Vale shipments had been scheduled for delivery before morning. 3 carried ordinary 7-point batch numbers. The 4th listed seals 37 through 54. 18 consecutive seals. "The missing bales," Sebastian said. The shipment was due by river at 6 o'clock in the morning aboard a barge named Mercy Jane. Captain Rowe ordered mounted officers sent to every London quay. Fenwick prepared instructions to isolate the shipment without announcing the reason. For the first time, Hawthorne appeared uncertain of Eleanor's guilt. Then, a bank clerk rushed into the chamber. "Governor, 3 provincial banks have suspended payment." News of the counterfeit bonds reached the exchange. Merchants are refusing Vale securities. Fenwick closed his eyes. "If London follows, we will have crowds at every bank by sunrise." Another messenger arrived moments later with a report from the government clearing warehouse. The Mercy Jane had delivered its cargo 10 hours ahead of schedule. The bales were already inside. Rowe ordered the warehouse locked, but Eleanor studied the delivery signature and felt a new chill. The barge captain had supposedly arrived at 8 that morning, 2 hours before the river gate at Vale Works was opened. The real Mercy Jane could not have carried the stolen paper. Someone had used its name to admit 18 counterfeit bales into the most secure financial warehouse in Britain. And whoever had signed them inside possessed a government officer's seal. Governor Fenwick ordered the clearing warehouse closed under armed guard. Hawthorne protested when Captain Rowe demanded possession of his official seal, but the magistrate finally removed it from his chain. The device carried a lion, a crown, and 3 small stars. The warehouse register bore the same design. Eleanor examined both impressions beneath a lamp. The shapes match, but the pressure does not. Hawthorne frowned. "A seal is a seal." "No. Every hand leaves a pattern. You press downward and slightly toward your thumb. The mark on the register leans in the opposite direction." "Then someone else used my seal. Or copied it." Sebastian looked at the magistrate. "Who had access to the device?" "My secretary occasionally carries it between offices. It was missing for 2 hours last week, but I believed I had misplaced it." "Who knew that?" Hawthorne's face tightened. "Sir Malcolm Vale. He was in my office complaining about delays in the sale of the mills." The first direct link to Eleanor's uncle was weak, but it was more than they had possessed before. Captain Rowe placed Hawthorne's seal inside an evidence envelope and signed across the flap. Mrs. Bellamy's simple custody record had changed the way he handled every object. At the clearing warehouse, 18 bales stood in a locked chamber watched by soldiers. Each was bound with blue and black cord and carried a numbered lead seal from 37 through 54. Rowe compared seal 43 on one bale with the crushed disc recovered at Vale Works. "They bear the same number," he said. "One is a replacement," Eleanor replied. 2 genuine seals were never issued with the same number. "How do we determine which is authentic?" Eleanor asked for both seals to be weighed. The warehouse scale was designed for cargo, not objects so small, but Sebastian sent a footman to a nearby apothecary and returned with a brass balance. The recovered seal was heavier by nearly 1/6 of an ounce. "My father mixed a small amount of tin into the lead," Eleanor explained. "It made the seals brittle enough to break if anyone tried to open a bale and close it again." The seal on the warehouse bale was pure lead. It had been cast from a copy. Rowe ordered bale 43 opened. The outer layers contained blank government paper bearing the flawed 8-point crown. Beneath them lay bundles of printed bonds. Fenwick selected one and performed Eleanor's heated spoon test. The hidden 8th point appeared. Hawthorne's certainty finally broke. If these entered circulation tomorrow, every authentic Vale security would become suspect, Fenwick said. The bank would suspend them all. Sebastian examined the bale's false bottom. Beneath the last bundle lay dozens of wedding caricatures, apparently used to protect the bonds from the wooden base. Eleanor picked up one by its blank edge. The same stolen batch had been used to mock her across England. "The newspapers were not merely attacking your marriage," Sebastian said. "They were testing how the paper accepted ordinary printer's ink." "And distributing samples," Eleanor replied. Anyone who later found one could be told that Vale paper had entered public circulation through me. Her humiliation had been a rehearsal for the larger fraud. Rowe searched the remaining bales. 17 contained counterfeit bonds. The last held commercial paper and a small wooden box filled with correspondence. The letters showed that an unnamed investor had purchased large portions of Ashcomb's debt at a fraction of its value. If the mills lost their treasury contract and the bank rejected Vale securities, Sebastian's creditors could demand immediate repayment. Ashcombe would be forced into sale. Another document granted Sir Malcolm a share of both the mills and the estate once the sale was completed. It contained no signature from him, only the initial M. Not enough for a conviction, Hawthorne said. But enough to establish motive, Eleanor replied. One page listed payments to newspapers, printers, warehouse clerks, and a magistrate's secretary. The recipients were identified by codes rather than names. Beside one payment appeared the words, "Bride secured." Public ridicule exceeds expectation. Sebastian went very still. Eleanor read the sentence twice. Their marriage had not interrupted the conspiracy. Someone had wanted it to happen. A duchess accused of counterfeiting could destroy Ashcombe and Vale with a single scandal. Had Eleanor remained unmarried, the failure of her mills would have damaged only her inheritance. By marrying Sebastian, she had given the conspirators access to a far greater prize. "I thought I chose the timing," Sebastian said. "Someone ensured you were desperate enough to propose." His family debts had worsened after two creditors unexpectedly demanded payment in the same week. The anonymous investor had probably controlled those debts before the marriage. They carried the wooden box into a private counting room. Rowe stationed guards outside while Hawthorne returned to the bank with Fenwick. For the first time since the cathedral, Eleanor and Sebastian were briefly alone. He stood beside the window, watching depositors gather in the streets below. "My mother was destroyed by a newspaper scandal," he said. "She was accused of taking a lover after my father died. The story was false, but every denial produced another headline. She stopped leaving Ashcombe. Within a year, she was dead." Eleanor understood the silence at the cathedral now, but understanding did not erase it. "So you learned that public cruelty should be endured quietly. I learned that fighting it gives the crowd more pleasure. And today your silence told them their cruelty was acceptable." "Yes. No defense. No request for immediate forgiveness." Sebastian faced her. "When they laughed at you, I told myself I was protecting you by refusing to create a scene. The truth is that I was protecting myself from reliving my mother's disgrace." Eleanor's anger did not disappear, but it changed shape. "The scar they laughed at came from a vat explosion," she said. "I was 15. A boy named Daniel fell beside the boiling pulp. I pulled him away before the second pipe burst." Sebastian looked at the mark without pity. "You saved him." "I was praised for 1 week. Then people returned to calling me ugly. That was when my father taught me that usefulness should not depend upon applause." Sebastian's hand rested near hers on the table, not touching. "I have spent years mistaking silence for strength," he said. "You have been silent only when you were choosing where to strike." The space between their hands narrowed, but before either moved, Captain Rowe entered carrying the warehouse admission book. "We have something," he said. Under the false delivery entry, Eleanor found a second indentation. Someone had written on a sheet placed above the page and removed it afterward. Using the side of a graphite stick, she shaded the paper until the hidden words appeared. "Reed's wife held at Marlow Street. Pike compliant. Burn remaining records after confirmation." It was the first proof that Amos's missing wife, the frightened clerk, and the counterfeit shipment belonged to the same plan. Captain Rowe sent officers to Marlow Street and ordered Thomas Pike placed under protection. Then the warehouse bell rang. One sharp stroke. The signal that an unauthorized person had entered. Smoke curled beneath the counting room door. Someone outside slid the bolt into place. Eleanor heard liquid splashing across the corridor, followed by the unmistakable crackle of flame. Their discovery had already reached the conspirators, and they intended to burn the witnesses with the evidence. Eleanor seized the wooden box, while Sebastian overturned the counting table against the door. Flames raced along the corridor, fed by lamp oil. Smoke filled the room faster than heat. "The window," Captain Rowe said. It opened above a stone loading yard 2 stories below. Jumping would break a man's legs, if not his neck. Eleanor wrapped the wooden box in a wool curtain and pushed it beneath the table. "Why are you hiding it?" Sebastian demanded. Because paper survives heat longer when insulated. We must survive first. She pulled the remaining curtain from its rod and thrust it into a basin of water. During the mill accident that scarred her, her father had taught her never to run blindly through flame. Smoke killed first. Wet wool bought time. They covered their faces. Roe and Sebastian rammed the table against the door. The bolt held through the first 2 blows. On the third, the frame cracked. Fire swept through the opening and caught Sebastian's coat. Eleanor struck the flames with the wet curtain before they reached his hair. They entered the corridor crouching beneath the smoke. A warehouse guard lay unconscious near the stairs. Sebastian lifted him, but part of the burning ceiling collapsed across their path. There is another stairwell beyond the bond chamber, Roe shouted. The bond chamber will already be burning, Eleanor replied. Use the freight lift. A wooden platform hung inside a vertical shaft beside the loading room. Its rope controls could lower heavy bales to the ground floor. Flames had reached the upper pulley, and the rope was beginning to smoke. Eleanor climbed onto the platform first and released the brake. Sebastian carried the guard aboard while Roe cut away a burning section of rope. The platform dropped so violently that Eleanor's knees struck the boards. Sebastian caught her before she fell through the open side. The brake failed halfway down. Roe wrapped the loose rope around an iron hook. The fibers tore through his gloves, but the platform slowed just before it struck the ground. They escaped into the yard as the upper windows shattered behind them. Soldiers formed a bucket line from the river. The fire had begun in 4 separate places, proving deliberate ignition, but the warehouse superintendent was missing. So were the 2 guards stationed outside the counting room. Sebastian tried to return for the wooden box. Eleanor stopped him. The ceiling is collapsing. That box contains the payment list. It is not worth your life. The roof fell moments later. By midnight, the warehouse had become a black shell. All 18 counterfeit bales were destroyed. The wooden box, the coded payment records, and the written reference to Mrs. Reed disappeared with them. Captain Roe still possessed the graphite-rubbed admission page inside his coat, but fire and water had blurred most of the indentation. Only 4 words remained legible. Reed's wife, Pike, burn, confirmation. It suggested conspiracy. It proved almost nothing. The newspapers arrived before the fire was extinguished. Duchess destroys evidence of her treason. The article claimed Eleanor had requested private access to the counting room and started the fire after Captain Roe discovered letters proving her guilt. It also reported that Sebastian had helped her escape Crown custody. The story contained details that had occurred less than an hour earlier. Someone was sending reports directly from the warehouse. At dawn, Hawthorne received an order from the Chancellor. Eleanor was to be transferred to the Tower for questioning. Ashcombe's revenues would be seized under Sebastian's earlier guarantee. Sir Malcolm was appointed temporary controller of Vale Security Works because he was supposedly the only family representative not under suspicion. The conspiracy had achieved nearly everything it wanted. Sebastian read the order in the burned warehouse yard. His left hand had been blistered by the rope, and one sleeve was scorched. "You must let them take me," Eleanor said. "If you resist, they will accuse you of treason as well. They already accuse me of assisting you. You can still protect Ashcombe. By abandoning you publicly? By preserving the estate for the families who depend upon it." He looked toward the reporters gathering outside the gates. Then Sebastian did precisely what the man at the cathedral would never have done. He walked toward them. "I opened my wife's private box against her warning," he said loudly. "I allowed the Crown to use planted evidence because I feared the appearance of obstruction more than I valued her judgment. That failure is mine." The reporters began shouting questions. Sebastian raised his injured hand. The Duchess of Ashcombe identified every counterfeit object recovered yesterday. She exposed the false warehouse records and the fraudulent delivery. If the Crown imprisons her while appointing the man who controlled the mills during the theft, then I will challenge that decision before the House of Lords. His declaration destroyed any remaining chance of quietly protecting his title. Eleanor watched the crowd turn toward her. Some still stared at her scar, but they were no longer laughing. Hawthorne took her to a guarded carriage. Sebastian was forbidden to accompany her. Yet before the door closed, he placed Mrs. Bellamy's original search ledger in Eleanor's hands. Rowe convinced Hawthorne that you may retain one document for your defense. The ledger recorded every officer, servant, and object handled at Ashcombe House. Eleanor read it during the journey. The black box containing the watermarking die had been removed from Sebastian's cabinet at 11:23. Officer Matthew Hale had carried it into the hall. Yet Hale's name also appeared beside the search of Eleanor's bedroom at the same time. One man could not have been in both places. At first, Eleanor assumed it was a clerical mistake. Then she remembered the counterfeit shipment admitted under the name of a real barge that had never arrived. The conspiracy repeatedly used authentic names to place false people inside secured locations. The officers, workers, and delivery crews were not necessarily corrupt. Someone was using duplicate identities to move among them. Eleanor studied the newspapers. Every false report had appeared before official information could travel to a printer. The caricature campaign, the forged evidence, and the warehouse fire all depended upon impersonators carrying genuine-looking orders. Then she recalled the treasury bond shown outside the cathedral. Captain Rowe had refused to reveal who first identified it as veil paper. If the confidential informant had also used a stolen name, the entire investigation had begun with a witness who did not exist. Eleanor looked at the remaining words on Rowe's damaged graphite rubbing. Pike compliant. Thomas Pike had been frightened into repeating a prepared statement. If the conspirators believed the warehouse fire had destroyed every record, they would expect him to maintain that lie at the public inquiry. She finally understood how to force them into the open. She would not prove immediately that Pike's testimony was false. She would let Sir Malcolm rely upon it, under oath, before the House of Lords, and make him describe a meeting that could never have occurred. Eleanor spent only 4 hours under guard before Sebastian's petition forced the Treasury to present its accusations publicly. By noon, a special inquiry assembled in the House of Lords. Bank officials, Treasury magistrates, representatives of Vale Security Works, and dozens of peers crowded the chamber. The galleries were packed with people who had come to see the ugliest duchess in England condemned. This time Eleanor entered without a veil. Captain Rowe met her beside the witness table. "We found Mrs. Reed at Marlow Street," he whispered. "2 men were holding her in a rented room. She is safe under bank protection." "And Pike?" "Also protected. He has agreed to testify truthfully. Do not let either of them enter until Sir Malcolm has committed himself." Rowe nodded. Sebastian stood on the opposite side of the chamber. The Crown had forbidden him from speaking privately with Eleanor, but his presence was its own declaration. Ashcombe's revenues had been seized that morning. He now risked his title, estate, and political standing merely by standing beside the woman England expected him to abandon. Sir Malcolm spoke first. He described Eleanor as an intelligent but bitter woman who resented society for rejecting her appearance. According to him, she had used her knowledge of paper manufacturing to continue a scheme begun by her father. Marriage to Sebastian had given her access to noble influence and provided protection when the counterfeits entered circulation. She did not marry for affection, Sir Malcolm declared. She married because a duchess is harder to prosecute than a tradesman's daughter. Laughter stirred in the gallery. Sebastian rose. The Lord Chancellor ordered silence before he could speak. Sir Malcolm produced the forged letters found inside Eleanor's dispatch box, the copper printing plate, and the list of bank routes. He also presented Thomas Pike's original statement accusing Eleanor of ordering alterations to the warehouse ledger. "Her Grace claims every object was planted," Sir Malcolm said, "yet she asks this chamber to believe that half of London entered her rooms, copied her handwriting, bribed her employees, and manufactured evidence merely to injure a woman of no political importance." The insult was calculated. Sir Malcolm wanted Eleanor to react with anger. She remained seated. When invited to answer, she requested permission to question her uncle directly. Sir Malcolm approached the witness rail with complete confidence. "You controlled Vale Security Works after my father's death?" Eleanor asked. "As trustee, yes. You possessed keys to the warehouse, the mill office, and my father's private cabinet? So did you. Did you know an experimental watermarking die remained in that cabinet? No, your father concealed many things. Did you ever see the experimental crown? Never. Eleanor allowed the denial to settle over the chamber. She then turned to Pike's written accusation. This statement says I instructed Mr. Pike to falsify the ledger on June 14th. Where did the meeting occur? Sir Malcolm glanced at Pike's statement. In the Mills West office. At what hour? Shortly after 8 in the evening. And you saw me enter? I did. Eleanor looked toward Sebastian. On June 14th, at 8 in the evening, she had been inside Ashcombe House, signing the first draft of their marriage settlement. Sebastian, 2 solicitors, Mrs. Bellamy, and a magistrate had witnessed her presence until nearly midnight. Mrs. Bellamy's household book was produced. It recorded Eleanor's arrival, supper tray, departure time, and the names of everyone present. Sir Malcolm adjusted his answer. I may have mistaken the date. Mr. Pike's statement gives the same date. Then he was mistaken as well. Thomas Pike was brought into the chamber under guard. His hands shook, but this time he looked directly at Eleanor. Did I meet you at the mill on June 14th? She asked. No, Your Grace. Why did you claim that I did? Pike's eyes moved towards Sir Malcolm. A man wearing a Treasury officer's coat told me Mrs. Reed would die if I refused. He gave me the words to memorize. Did you know him? No, but Sir Malcolm was present when the man showed me the prepared statement. The gallery erupted. Sir Malcolm called Pike a liar, attempting to save himself from prosecution. Eleanor next produced Mrs. Bellamy's search ledger. Officer Matthew Hale was recorded in 2 locations at the same moment. Captain Rowe testified that the real Hale had spent that entire morning guarding the mill gate and had never entered Ashcombe House. An impersonator carried the black box from the library, Eleanor said. The same method admitted false bails under the name of a real barge and delivered false reports under the names of real officers. Sir Malcolm leaned upon his silver-headed cane. Clever speculation. It proves nothing against me. Then let us discuss access. The black box appeared inside a locked cabinet belonging to my husband. Who knew the Duke's secretary possessed the second key? Any servant might have known. The secretary testified that he disclosed it to only 3 people, the Duke, Captain Rowe, and the man who negotiated my marriage settlement. Every face turned toward Sir Malcolm. He smiled thinly. Knowing of a key does not prove I used it. No, nor does opportunity alone prove guilt. Eleanor placed the crushed lead seal numbered 43 on the evidence table. Rowe confirmed that it had been recovered at the mill, witnessed by Amos, then sealed and retained in Treasury custody before the warehouse fire. The duplicate seal from the counterfeit bail was gone, but the intake register recorded its lower weight. The records established that someone had copied a genuine veil seal, forged Amos's initials, and removed 18 bales through an abandoned gate. Sir Malcolm had controlled the mill guards, records, and keys on the night of the theft. Still, he remained calm. You have established only that a crime occurred while I was trustee, he said. Perhaps I trusted the wrong employees. That is incompetence, not treason. Eleanor turned to motive. The forged letters claimed her father began the scheme. Yet the first counterfeit bonds appeared only after Sir Malcolm arranged the proposed sale of Vale Works and Sebastian's creditors, unexpectedly called in their loans. Hawthorne testified that Sir Malcolm had visited his office during the disappearance of the magistrate's seal. Governor Fenwick produced banking records showing that the anonymous purchaser of Ashcombe's debt used the same solicitor handling the attempted sale of the mills. The solicitor had vanished. Sir Malcolm spread his hands. Again, no signature, no payment bearing my name. He was right. The fire had destroyed the document promising him a share of Ashcombe. The surviving evidence surrounded him, but had not yet closed. Eleanor asked Captain Rowe to place the watermarking die on the evidence table, concealed beneath a square of black cloth. My father's notebook describes a flaw in this instrument, she said. I will write its location before the die is uncovered. She wrote a sentence, folded it, and gave it to the Lord Chancellor. Then she deliberately said, "The scratch crosses the second point of the crown." Sir Malcolm laughed. You cannot even remember your own evidence. The flaw crosses the longest point. Silence fell so suddenly that the turning of a newspaper page sounded like tearing cloth. Sir Malcolm's smile vanished. Eleanor faced him. You testified under oath that you had never seen the experimental crown. The flaw was never entered in a treasury record. It appeared only in my father's private notebook and in the sealed description Captain Rowe created at the mill. Rowe stepped forward carrying the evidence envelope bearing his signature, Amos Reed's mark, and an unbroken treasury seal. Inside was the description written before Sir Malcolm had been told that the scratch mattered. The Lord Chancellor reached for the envelope. Sir Malcolm gripped his cane with both hands, and Eleanor waited for the seal to be broken.